Andres wanted me to come and talk about the concept of reliability with respect to small-talk virtual machines. And as I started thinking about what it was I was going to say, because the problem is, how do you think of ways to describe something that you don't even see because it's the only way you can possibly think? It occurred to me every single avenue that I took, every metaphor I stumbled across, none of them were software metaphors, none of them were virtual machine specific, but there were commonalities across all of the different metaphors that I could think of. So everything I'm about to say absolutely matters for virtual machines. It also matters for small-talk code. It also matters for the environment in which you write the small-talk code and work on the virtual machines. It matters for the environment where your computer is physically, where you're actually trying to do the thinking and do the work. It matters across the board. So it's going to be a little bit more general. And what I'd like to focus on is the notion of training yourself to be able to question things reflexively, because it's a core skill. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter how clever or talented you are in the specifics of any particular tool, because at some point somebody's going to say, oh, well, if I wanted to take a piece of plywood and cut it in half, obviously you use a circular saw, because that always works. It's the general solution. What if it's raining? There's a warning label that says, under no circumstances use in a wet environment. So it's still not a general solution. So I'd like to start with a quote that I really, really like. Whoa! That was a flirk. Okay. Oh, this sucks. No. Hold on. Okay, this is good. All right. So, George Carlin is an American comedian, and I really, really like him. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Disproven. No. Everybody can read this. Don't just read the words, obviously. Don't just teach your children how to read. That's not the point. The words aren't the point. Think about what this means. It means that in order to walk from this side of the stage to the other side, obviously I've got to take steps. But at no point do I lose track of the fact that there could be a hole in the subfloor right here. And so you have to always question every single little thing. And if you stop doing that, then you will miss extremely significant opportunities. And so the whole idea is to be able to set up some minimal conditions for allowing your intellectual curiosity to be just absolutely, completely expressed without constantly stubbing your toe on these little tiny, details that get in the way, and they stop the thought process from happening. So another way to think about this is the second that you start thinking, oh, well, I know that this is true, there needs to be a little process in the back of your brain that says, are you sure about that? Well, every single time I've ever executed this is, the following is the result. Is that necessarily the only result? I mean, is there a way to prove it? When it comes to software, unless you're talking about very, very trivial little examples, proving software correctness is really not a useful notion. So another thing to keep in mind as we're going through these various issues, because again, these are general philosophical points. I'm not talking about specific tools or specific rules or anything like that. Another thing to keep in mind is that human beings derive comfort from being able to just assume that certain things are the way they are. So everybody here, I assume, drives an automobile at some point. And everybody here has driven from a specific point A to a specific point B numerous times during their life. How many times have you made that trip and arrived at your destination alive, on time and everything? But it dawns on you that you have no idea, you were not consciously paying attention to the fact that you were driving. So it became familiar The familiarity gives you comfort. As you're driving along, your brain's like, oh, well, this is what I got to get at the grocery store. Think about something else. And you get comfort from that. Problem is, a dog runs out in front of you. So you're not attentive, you're not paying attention, you never expected it to happen. It might never happen in an individual person's lifetime. You have to be aware. You constantly think about what could possibly happen at this point. How would I react? Do I trust this? I don't trust anything. So, title of the talk, Reliable Smalltalk Virtual Machines. Well, it's not virtual machine specific, it's not Smalltalk specific. What does it mean to be reliable? So, again, everybody can read. Consistently, incredibly important. It means, what can you do? What are the things that you can do that almost all the time, except for extremely rare situations, are always a little bit helpful? You need to be able to trust things. You can't build a building unless you know that you've got a solid footing. You can build the building, but then of course you're going to have 100 years of, oh, well, it's listing this way, now we have to jack it up, and you end up with just a lifetime of maintenance. That's not what you want. You want to build another building. So, as a metaphor for this, several months ago I watched a documentary that was called Tiny. And in the United States, and I think North America in general, there's a movement that's happening where these people are creating these incredibly small houses. So this is their primary residence. These houses are anywhere from 80 square feet to 300 or 400 square feet. And there's multiple people in them. The consequences of this change are really, really profound, and they're illustrative of practices that you can train yourself to do. Making sure that you question, why is that necessary? Why is that necessary? And the result is not a direct result of making this decision at this point gives you this benefit. The result is the cumulative effect of a perspective. And there are perspectives that end up making you happier. Let's see here. So, okay, that's going to drive me absolutely. Speaking of reliable. All right. So I'm just going to refer to it as the tiny house movement. The photographs that I've got in here, just so there's an attribution, a guy named Jay Schaefer has this book called The Small House Book, in which he feeds a lot off of Alexander. Alexander is referenced multiple times throughout his book because if something's a good idea, you might as well go ahead and use it. And when things seem to consistently produce desirable results, there's probably something there worth considering. So let's start off with, I'd like to describe some of the people that were in this documentary. And I have a link to the documentary at the end, so anybody who wants to check it out. I highly recommend checking it out and watching it with a completely open mind. Question everything. So think about the concept of being in a home where everything that you're consciously aware of in the home has some utility, some function. It's something that you use. You need a kitchen. You need some personal space, things like that. And you look around and you think, well, this is just fantastically beautiful. So what's interesting about the people that are documented in this film called Tiny is they're all extremely different. Their backgrounds are very different. Some of the people were in finance, making large amounts of money in a high-stress environment in a large city. There are other people who were diagnosed with a terminal illness. You've got some people that are just really young. They're just starting out. They don't have many resources available to them. And what's fascinating is that at some point in their lives, the general idiopathic malaise got to such a degree, they were so unhappy that they stopped and they questioned and they said, wait a minute, surely this can't be what it's supposed to be like. What am I doing wrong? But of course you can't see what you're doing wrong. So once they made that realization, that maybe this isn't good. Maybe there's some actual problem. They started looking into, well, wait a minute, is that necessary? Is it necessary to have a media room? Is it necessary to have a 1,200 square foot kitchen that seats 20 people? All these things. They started questioning all of it. And when you start doing that, you realize curtains aren't important. The notion of having a living room and a family room and all these labels, these components of buildings, in and of themselves are not important. What matters is, what is it that you actually need? Because everything that you build is going to just constantly, throughout the rest of your life, suck your substance from you. You're going to have to maintain it. You're going to have to pay for it. If you're going to have to pay for it, it means you're going to have to work. You're going to have to make enough money to pay for it. Now, are you working in a job that pays $500,000 a year doing finance, but you hate everybody you work with, and you don't like the environment, and every day you spend 4 hours in the car going back and forth? The reason that you're doing that is because you've got a 6,000 square foot house that you got to pay off. The kids got to go to university, and all of these things that you believed, oh, well, obviously a normal person has this. Well, everybody has a huge house. Well, everybody has 2 brand new cars. Question that. Is that really, do you really need that? Because as soon as you start questioning that, you end up realizing that the dogma, the rules that you've been told since you were very, very young, this is normal and this is what you need. You realize that those are basically the same thing. They're tantamount to driving on autopilot. You no longer are questioning everything. You end up with an accumulation of inappropriate, unnecessary, harmful decisions. And you never realized it because you weren't paying attention. So think about, I don't know how many people here use like shell terminals on a regular basis. It drives me absolutely crazy when somebody contacts me and says, oh, well, I have this problem, can you help me? And I connect to their machine. And you're doing something, and you hit the backspace key. And what do you see? You see a caret and a question mark. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, so we got multiple keys in order to go backwards. It never occurs to them. Because I always ask, well, wait a minute, is there something different with your keyboard? Maybe maybe I've got a problem. It never occurs to them that there's a very simple thing that you can do that just makes that go away. So in my mind, that kind of a little trivial problem, they grow and grow because it's going to take you probably 2 or 3 hours to figure out, okay, wait a minute, now how can I control this? Well, how do you control it? Well, what are the rules for TTY configuration? You connect to Solaris machines and Linux machines, and you use Cygwin's version of the terminal programs and whatnot, and they're all a little tiny bit different. But given the environment you have, it's really, really nice to be able to connect, allow your brain to think, and then your hands just kind of transliterate, code onto the screen, or they try things without what is functionally the exact same thing as black flies. These little flies that we have up in the northern hemisphere, in the far northern, part of the North America. I assume that they're pretty much everywhere in the extreme latitudes. They travel in 2 different groups. There's either one single black fly, and they're a biting fly. So they're eating little pieces of you. There's either one of them, or there's 50,000 of them. If there's one of them, you type something, there's one key on the keyboard you never ever hit, that one's not mapped right. Okay, that's one black fly. You can brush it off and go along your business. However, if you find yourself trying to light a fire, walk your dogs, mow the grass, any of these activities, and you're in a normal black fly situation, it means there's 50,000 of them. And it's a humbling experience. Unlike these code problems and computer environment problems that we all experience, the black flies hurt. They will drive you insane. They prevent your mind from being able to think about anything because of the constant distractions. So terminal settings are a very trivial example. Now consider the work that I do, like I said, for my experience is coming from doing virtual machine programming for 17 years. I was trained in biological evolution. I'm also a firefighter. These are all different areas where there's a thing that you need to do, especially firefighting. You will never go onto a scene, a particular scene, and just say, oh, well, here's the solution to this problem, and now all we have to do is just execute it, and we can just zone out. Everyone is different, and what you end up with is a set of tools, and you have to apply the tools. That means you have to have an environment where you take your blinders off, and you think, okay, what is the fastest way to resolve this situation? That requires questioning every single little thing that you're doing, because you need to always take one step forward. You can never go backwards. So it is better to take little steps forward that you can depend on, that you don't have to think, okay, wait a minute, what's going to happen next? Or, between that is better than taking huge strides, losing your balance, and then you sprain your ankle, and now you're part of the problem, and your buddies have to pick you up, as well as the people that called you in the first place. Everything spirals out of control. Think about GUI IDE environments. They have some really interesting qualities. They give you a lot of real simple access to a certain set of features. You can macroize certain sequences of commands, certain sequences. You typically can just kind of like configure and store things like, here's how I want the build product to be packaged, and and that gets squirreled away in some menu pick somewhere. A lot of times it's because people say, oh, well, I looked at the code in Xterm as if that's a real thing, and I didn't like the font. But the font in this window is really nice and it's easy to read, so I'm going to use that tool. Well, what you needed was a more readable font. And you can do that in a lot of places. But what you're doing is you're saying, oh, I need this font. That has it. Oh, well, there's a tool. Now I'm going to use this tool for everything. Well, problem with the GUI IDEs when compared to an environment where you have a lowest common denominator tool set, where you actually know how to configure your terminal so that they're all transparently the same. You use things like, I use Vim, the editor, for almost everything, including doing Smalltalk code, because I every once in a while go up into Smalltalk, but otherwise I'm down here. All computers don't have Vim installed. Now they kind of do, but it wasn't the case historically. However, going to an environment where VI is present, which is every single Unix environment on the planet, you can say, okay, well, I don't have a couple of these nice things. You can easily roll back your tool usage, and it doesn't affect your ability to think. The GUI IDEs are very appealing. The idea of them is appealing. Having a menu pick, it should just be that simple. The problem is the result of simply making the decision, I'm going to use a graphical-based IDE system, that's just the rule, and now we're moving on. The result of that is, what impact does that have on your ability to actually think about the complex problem that you really want to think about? To what degree is the tool limiting your ability to think? So think about something as trivial as doing a refactoring where you remove some particular identifier. Okay, so is it removed? So in a command line, I can go in and I can say yes or no to that question without even thinking about it. The commands are reflex. You use grep, and you just search through everything. I don't care if it's a GIF file or if it's a virtual image or some random binary that happens to be in some directory or whatever. It's going to search everything for that pattern, and you're going to know whether that pattern occurred or not. You now have the information, and now you move forward. You have POSIX regular expressions, which are at least minimally necessary, as far as regular expression syntax. Ideally, you have at least extended POSIX regular expressions, and in the best of all worlds, you've got Perl regular expressions. Because now you've got one way of translating, I'm looking for something that looks like this. You have a way of expressing that to the computer that can find any pattern that you're going to think of. that tool exists on your Solaris machine. It exists on your Linux machine. It can't exist on your Windows machine. It exists, on your OS X machine. Same tool, same abstract language that you're translating your question to, and you no longer think about the act of how do I code this query. I want to know this piece of information. I don't care how it is, how I know it. I don't want to have to think about it every single time. In a GUI IDE, there are some that have extensions that pops open a window and says, oh, well, here's a powerful search syntax for expression matching. Problem is, it's not Perl regular expressions, which means that now this really abstract language that you're translating your query into is a special language for that tool. So what do you do when you're thinking about where does this particular bug come from? A customer reports a bug, a user reports a bug. It says, if the tools that you've decided are going to be the only tools that you use are not present, that affects your ability to actually just think abstractly about the problem. Your progress is, at this point, completely hindered. So the people in the documentary, of course, once they realize, wait a minute, something is wrong, and they start questioning everything in their environment because they don't see where the problem is, and so it could be coming from anywhere. It could be coming from everywhere. So then you start thinking about, well, okay, what are some general concepts for getting me, to a better place? It's very easy, and you see this all the time, where people say, oh, okay, well, I'm done because all the features are now included. Every feature I can think of is there. And they say, oh, well, now I'm done. Problem is, somebody somewhere is going to come up with a special case that you hadn't thought of. And so now, do you write yet another feature to take care of that case? Or do you have a philosophy that says, I'm really good if I can't delete anything else. So I have the fewest number of things that, in order to maintain. So you think about the people when they start building these houses. You can build these houses for anywhere between like $6,000 US. And the most expensive one that this guy has in his book is $30,000. That means you very likely do not have a mortgage. You don't have a mortgage. Now, you don't necessarily have to have that job you don't like. You could go and take this job that pays less that you really enjoy. Your entire world improves. And it was because you found, wait a minute, there's all kinds of stuff I can take away, but you hadn't thought of actually taking it away because society says, oh, you have to have one of these. So again, you have to question everything. Since my remote doesn't work. So the consequences of this. This is the goal. The goal is your brain is permitted to be free of black flies. Your brain is permitted to be free of terminal misconfiguration errors. All of these things that have nothing at all to do with the ideas that you're trying to think about, the beauty that you're trying to find, the coherency that you're trying to find. Your brain is extremely powerful, provided that you're not constantly kneecapping it all the time with these unintended side effects of things that have to be a certain way because you never question this. So by eliminating misconfiguration stuff, by not being lured into the idea that, oh, well, here's a tool that has all these features, therefore it must be better than this tool that doesn't have the features. Well, now you're thinking about features and what fonts are available. You're not thinking about, wait a minute, what do I need the tool to do? Because ultimately, I can look at a piece of code and it could be rendered perfectly in some particular font and very easy to read. But that's not what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about, wait a minute, now that variable's referenced here, where else is it referenced? Same tool that I used to go and find, well, what file did I put the grocery list in? The exact same process. That finds, oh, where's every place that this variable is referenced. And so you're not thinking about tool selection. You're thinking about, oh, well, I have this question. Well, what happens if? How do I do this? What are the consequences of this? And the tools are just reflexive, or not reflexive, automatic. They're subconscious. You don't think about it anymore. So all of your brain is now engaged in seeking the solution to this problem, and none of your brain is engaged with the constant distraction of, oh, wait a minute, the window's not big enough. Oh, wait a minute, I can't find, where this thing is referenced. Oh, wait a minute, the tool doesn't do this. Oh, maybe this, that's all a distraction. All you want to think about is the abstract idea. It's hard enough if you can discover the abstract, the shape of the abstract idea that you're searching for. It's hard enough to translate that into a concrete form and actually use it. It's impossible if you're constantly distracted by, oh, well, the network connection doesn't work. In these presentations, you frequently have, oh, well, maybe the plug's not in. Oh, well, all of this stuff. So, again, you have to question everything. It might mean that you feel like you're going a little bit slower, but what you're doing is you're eliminating a vast amount of busy work that is interfering with the way that you want to be thinking about processes. And the way that this guy stated it is the only way that you can be really, truly happy is to be able to spend your own life in your own way, doing what you enjoy. The people who ended up moving to these houses, another thing that they discovered was now there's all of a sudden hours in the day that they were wasting on busy work before. But now they can do something. They can grow themselves. They can, investigate books. They can, make their own garden. And that's the goal. You want to be able to be free so that you can consider anything that is interesting that you want to consider, that you choose to consider, and not be worried about, well, wait a minute, I got to pay the power bill. So, the person that everybody here knows said exactly the same thing. But using slightly different words. If a system is to serve the creative spirit, whether it's your development environment, whether it's your home, whether it's lifestyle decisions, it doesn't make any difference, then the whole goal is that you have to have reliability, which means comprehensible to a single individual. You have to know what you know. You have to be able to rely upon it. And if you can't do that, it's going to hinder your progress. And it might feel faster today, and that's how these things accumulate. But ultimately, if your work style is not based on a core principle of reliability, the work product can't be. The reliable software is the result of a style of thinking and a way of looking at the world. And it's a natural, just automatic outcome of that thinking. So, yeah, that's basically it. I would like to go back to the George Carlin, because it's like, again, you have to question everything. Never take anything for granted. It doesn't help, and if you do it, your software is always going to be better. I also haven't spoken in public in like 10 years, so I'm sure it was a bit rough. So, is there any questions or comments?
Thanks for sharing so many insights.
You're welcome.
There. I was telling to Rebecca that it seems that we are kind of know-how from a technical world to lab, which is a part of more techniques to amplify that creative spirit. The relation with reliability. I want to understand better what's your insight of
Reliability, yeah.
Reliability,
yep.
Thank you. And critical thinking. Keep alive where active on the critical thinking because it has to do with that.
Mm-hmm. The skills that you use to think critically about problems, to always question everything, they're learned. You have to relearn them. Children don't have all of these rules that have been pounded into them. So, for instance, children are never scared of spiders. They're never scared of snakes. So, again, all these metaphors. When you're an adult, I want to go out and go wild rice harvesting. Oh, wait a minute, there's going to be spiders? Oh, then now I can't do that. So there's a thing that your brain, your child brain, wants to discover, right? There's a novelty, there's a beauty there, and you want to experience it. But you've learned this little rule, and that rule is now blocking you from being imagined. If I had more time and I had a better structure to the presentation, I would have drilled in a lot deeper into the idea that, I'm naturally suspicious of everything. I've always been that way. I distrust everything.
Could you say that this translates to the doctrinary thinking would be the enemy of reliability?
It is. Because then you end up with the process being the important thing. Process isn't the important thing. The process is simply a process. How do you get from here to here? And the goal is to get there. Because once you're there, that's when you're at the art museum. That's when you're at the fishing hole. That's when you are wherever it is that you want to be, cooking school or whatever. Once you're there, then you're doing the thing that you want to do. Nobody sits down and says, okay, I'm going to start this task and I'm going to do it poorly. I want a result that has really low quality and I just don't care. Nobody sits down. Everybody sits down thinking, I'm going to revolutionize the world. And the problem is you have to notice all of these things that are not part of your thinking about revolutionizing the world that are going to stop you. So it's not so much that you do it because you end up with reliability. Reliability is just a byproduct of your brain being set free so that it can do what your brain is immensely powerful. So you think about the Buddhist concept of enlightenment. No matter what Buddhist sect you're talking about, there's one thing that is absolutely required, and that thing is that you have to eliminate the self. You have to be able to observe passively. And if you can't observe passively, and this is something that you have to train yourself to do every single day, you have to think, okay, well, wait a minute. Okay, I just made this assertion. Let's step back a minute, slow down. You have to train yourself to do it. If you're not aware that this is important and the self is still there, you're going to get into conversations that everybody gets into all the time where somebody says something and the other person says, oh, well, what I think. They weren't observing. What they were doing is they were saying, well, I want to believe that you're going to this goal, right? So you're driving on autopilot. And I'm not really observing what it is, the concept. Because you're having to map an abstract concept into words. That's problematic. That's why we have dialogue. It's the whole Socratic method. This is what it's for. I have a concept. I want that concept to be visible to you. But we don't have a neural link that allows me to just, broadcast the electricity to you in the same structure. So what I have to do is I have to try to paint you a picture. If you're not looking at the picture that I'm painting, because you're thinking, oh, well, that's a stupid brush stroke, or, oh, no, clearly you need to use this color, then you're not going to be receptive. And if you're not receptive, then you're going to potentially miss something that you would walk away from and think, that was beautiful. And you're richer for it. The fact that you're richer for it means that in all other aspects of your life, you now just naturally produce things that are pleasant, that are kind, that are beautiful, that are well done. And what gets in the way of that is when somebody walks in and says, well, okay, this is what I want you to do. It's got to be done by 5 o'clock on Thursday. Well, but I haven't done it yet. I don't really know how to do it. I'm sure it won't take 3 years.
I was just to say that I found amazing that you get this insight that you share it by working with technology. And you reach to this conclusion. This is amazing, the link. I want to say thank you for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks.